Hello, sixth graders. This is Mr. Shearer, and congratulations on finishing Chapter 1. We are now moving into Chapter 2. So I'm going to briefly tell you about what your assignment is today, and then I'm going to start with a little bit of a Chapter 2 overview before we get into today's lesson. So your assignment is a worksheet today. It's on both place value of decimals and rounding decimals. And the reason we're talking about decimals is because Chapter 2 really covers two topics, decimals and percents. Again, I like to tell you how many lessons are in a chapter. There's 8 lessons in Chapter 2. The first 4 lessons deal pretty exclusively with decimals, and then the last 4 lessons deal with percents. And I view these as 2 separate topics, really. So there is a lot of material that we'll be doing, including today. That's not directly from your book. It's what I call supplemental material. And it's stuff that you need to know around decimals that the book doesn't cover. We will do chapter lessons 1 through 4. So we're basically going to work on decimals, and then we're going to test. And then we'll do lessons 5 through 8 and test on percents. So really, this chapter is broken up into 2 sections for me, lessons 1 through 4. We're going to be talking about decimals for the next few weeks. Then we'll take a test on decimals, and then we'll be doing the same thing with percents. And on many of these assignments, I'll recommend no calculator, including today's. You won't need it. So what we're looking at today is really an introduction to decimals. So this is a supplemental lesson. It's not from the book, it's a worksheet, and it's something the book doesn't talk about because it might be a review of stuff you've done last year. But just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, today we're talking about 2 things. The first is a review of decimal place value, and the second one is on how to round decimals. So we're going to start with decimal place value. And just first, a quick recap. This is not a decimal. This is just a normal number place value chart. And to remind you, place values start with 1, then it goes to tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. But really, it's this ones, tens, hundreds pattern. So 1,000s, 10,000s, 100,000s. And you could just keep doing that. Millions, 10 millions, 100 millions. After that would be billions, 10 billions, 100 billions, trillions, 10 trillions, 100 trillions. It just keeps going, that ones, tens, hundreds pattern, thousands to millions. Well, decimals do a very similar thing. So I want you just to look at this decimal place value. Notice the decimal is here. And really, they just do the same thing going the opposite direction. Tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. Next would be millions, 10 millions, 100 millions, billions, 10 billions, 100 billions, etc., etc., etc. But really, it's the same place value going the opposite direction. There are a few things of note that are a little bit different with decimals. You'll notice there's no ones place. Decimals start, that first number past the decimal is the tenths. And as you might also notice, all decimals end with a th. So it goes tenths, hundredths, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. Now, to say a decimal properly, like we've got this one, and most of you guys in real life will say 24.256, and for real life that's fine. But to just recap, to say a decimal properly, you start by saying the whole number. So 24. Then you say, instead of point, you need to say and. So 24 and. Then you just say whatever's left here as though it was a regular number. So 256. And you label it by what it ends with, the place value it ends with. So this one ends in the thousands place. So I would say 24 and 256 thousandths. Again, 24 and 256 thousandths. So if you want to pause the video and see if you can say this one properly, now's the time to pause. Otherwise, I'm going to stop talking for about 5 seconds, and then I'll explain. All right, so this one would be 13 and 67 hundredths. Okay, 2 more. Again, if you want to pause the video and try and say this number before I explain it, now's the time to pause. Great. 10 and you would say this number as though it was just a regular number, 6,739 10,000s. Again, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. So this would be 10 and 6,739 10,000s. Now this next one is just if you want a challenge, just for fun. And again, I would pause the video if you want to try and say that one. Okay, I'm going to solve it. So you got 1 and 47,543,985,174,051 trillions. We will not do any problems like this, but just a little bit of a challenge for those who wanted it. Okay, so what your assignment is. Your assignment has 2 parts. Part A, you have to write the place value of the underlying number. So you'll get a number like this, and you have to tell me which number is underlined, what is the place value. So in this case, of course, that would be the tens column. Number goes ones, tens, hundreds, this way. Here's another example of a question you might have on your assignment today. What number, what place value is underlined? Yep, that's the tenths. Remember, there's no ones column, so it goes tenths, hundredths, thousands. All right, this one. Thousands, tenths, hundredths, thousands. And one more. That's just the ones column. You got it. So, cool. Okay, decimal rounding, I'm actually going to jump into somebody else's explanation from a video. So we're going to watch somebody else's video that tells you how to round decimals.
On this short video, I'm going to show some examples of rounding decimals to the nearest place value. So here's one example, 17 and 14 hundredths. If we needed to round this to the nearest whole number, that means I want to round to the ones digit, the ones place value. So whatever it's asking you to round to, you want to underline that place value. You always look next door to the right, and that number will tell you to stay the same or go up. So of course, numbers 1 through 4, they tell you to stay. And then 5 through 9 tell you to raise. So sometimes it's a silly saying like 5 or more, raise the score, 4 or less, let it rest. So because this is 4 or less, it rests, and this would round to a 17 as the nearest whole number. Now, if we wanted to round to the nearest tenth, here's another example, 18 and 28 hundredths. If it's asking me to round to the nearest tenth, I would underline that place value, look next door, and because this 8 is 5 or more, it tells this number to go up. Just one digit, 18 and 3/10. We don't need to add a 0 because it only wants us to round to the tenths. We need to stop right here. Then if we needed to round to the hundredths, $23 and 445 thousandths. If I need to round to the nearest hundredth, I underline my hundredths place value. I look next door to the thousandths, and it's 5 or more, so it tells this 4 to go up. So you keep everything the same, except now when you get to the hundredths place, you raise it 1 more. And you leave it because it's only asked you to round to the hundredths.
Great, so we're going to finish with 3 examples. And we'll start, hang on just a sec here. So 3 examples. If you're asked to round this number 2 and 587 thousandths to the nearest hundredth, you can pause the video if you want to try and figure it out on your own. Otherwise, I'm going to solve. Great, so what she was saying in the video, the 8 is in the hundredth column, so you look 1 to the right and you look at that 7, and that 7 is going to tell your 8 either it goes up or it stays the same. In this case, it's going to go up to 2 and 59 hundredths. It's going to round up because the 7 is greater than 5. Let's do another one. Round to the nearest whole number, 13 and 289 thousandths. Pause the video if you want to try and solve it on your own. Okay, I'm going to solve. So again, whole number would be this 3. And we look 1 to the right. And the 2 is less than 5, so it's just going to round to an answer of 13. It would be 13.000, but you don't need to put that. You just leave it as 13. That's the nearest whole number, because the 2 made us stay the same here with the 3, with the ones column. Let's try one more. 7 and 6,008 10,000ths, rounded to the nearest thousandth. Pause your video if you want to try and solve. Okay. So identify the thousandths place, and that is a 0. Look 1 number to the right. It's an 8, so it's going to round up, and your answer would be 7 and 601 thousandths. That's it for today, guys. Again, it's a worksheet asking you to do 2 things. One is to identify place value, and the other one is to round decimals. Just should be hopefully a review from information you were exposed to last year, and then we will move on to Chapter 2, Lesson 1, either tomorrow or the next day, but we're in Chapter 2 now. Thanks for watching, as always, 6th graders, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.